All right, I just got back from seeing The Hobbit, literally just now. So you really are getting my initial reaction right after I saw the film. But as I do with any review, I like to talk about if the film is part of a trilogy or part of a saga of any kind, which seems to be quite frequent nowadays. I like to talk about those films and kind of what I thought about those. So in this case, it is the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And I kind of have a bit of a background with those because those films came out when I was ages 11 to 13. And I was the biggest Lord of the Rings fan ever. I mean, seriously, I was kind of crazy. It goes beyond just mere fandom into the reign of kind of very disturbing. I mean, I tried to learn Elvish when I was a kid. I mean, who does that? What kind of 12-year-old does that? I was the girl who, honestly, every Christmas, sorry, I would celebrate the Lord of the Rings anniversaries on the December 17th through 19th, because those are the days that the films came out into theaters. So every year I would celebrate while watching the films back to back to back. I made a contract for my parents that I had written myself saying that they could not do anything, they could not make any noises, they couldn't bother me, they couldn't make gay jokes about Frodo and Sam. Absolutely, they could do nothing. They had to completely let me just have my religious experience watching these movies. That's how seriously I took it. It's hilarious that when I think about it now, I find it really hilarious. But yeah, that was me, the crazy Lord of the Rings freak. And if you've ever wondered what my YouTube username or alias, whatever, is, at LOTR Lover, MR, it stands for Lord of the Rings Lover. And some people don't know that. But anyway, yes, I made that when I was like 13 years old or something like that. And I just never really got rid of it. And now, of course, I've moved on from the Lord of the Rings trilogy and I'm not as crazy about it anymore. It has more sentimental value than anything. I still think they're really magnificent films. I think it's a wonderful achievement, but I don't consider them the greatest films ever like I used to. I just think they're very admirable films. So I wish I could change that username, but I'm kind of stuck with it. Once you've made it, you're kind of stuck with it. So anyway, so going into The Hobbit, I obviously have some sort of standards and a history along with it, like many other fans do. But I'll just say that my initial reaction, as soon as the screen goes black and it says directed by Peter Jackson at the end, I just kind of thought, eh, you know, I mean, it was okay. It was not great. It wasn't bad. It was just, meh. I mean, really, that's the perfect, I guess, sum up I can think of. It was just okay. And I'm going to talk about the good things before I talk about the bad things, as usual. So I'll start with three things that I really did like. Number one, I really like Martin Freeman as Bilbo Baggins. He is fantastic. He really does capture the warmth, the humanity, and the quirks that Ian Holm did in the original trilogy. And he's a great hobbit. He really plays the slapstick, the humor, the dry sense of humor very well, but he really does have, heart and humanity. You immediately gravitate towards him and he's very relatable. And that's exactly who you want in a protagonist in a film, or I should say a trilogy like this, something that's really a mythology like this. It really does work. So you've got something really good in Martin Freeman. And I think he's just a better actor than Bilbo, or sorry, he's a lot better actor than Elijah Wood is. So immediately I care a lot more about him than I ever did about Frodo. So that's a really great thing. Number two, there are some really, really cool action sequences in this. Two in particular that I really liked. The film takes a while to start, going and start doing anything that seems like any sort of significance. But there's a sequence that's on a bridge that is fantastic to look at. I mean, really, just conceptually, it really worked well. The way that the camera moved and kind of followed these characters as they're being chased, as parts of the bridges and the rocks are coming down and they fall down onto other areas and keep running. It just really, really worked well. And there's a wonderful texture to it as well. So I thought brilliantly choreographed. Loved that sequence. And the very last sequence, it takes place on a bunch of trees that are falling down over a cliff. That was really, really cool. Very spectacular. Loved that. And of course, my third favorite thing, which is easily the best thing in the film, and I was really excited about this, and it really did live up to the hype, was the riddle sequence between Gollum, Smeagol, and Bilbo Baggins. It's the best part of the book, in my opinion. Gollum is arguably the greatest character in the Middle-earth mythology, or at least in my opinion, I believe he is. So this scene really did have a lot to live up to, and it really does measure up. Honestly, I would love to see that scene again. I just love the idea of two characters like Smeagol, Gollum, and Bilbo Baggins kind of trying to outwit each other. It's not really any sort of physical battle. It's more of like it's like they're playing chess against each other. You know, one character knows something and the other character is trying to figure it out until finally one character does kind of go out on top. And it's kind of the idea of, you know, having Smeagol. He was once a hobbit, but then he became Gollum, and you know he's kind of passing on the torch of this ring to Bilbo, and it's a fascinating thing. And Andy Serkis is such a phenomenal actor. He's just got this physicality, this animalistic physicality that is just perfect for Gollum. And I mean, he was so wonderful in all the other films. He completely takes Gollum right off the page and makes him a three-dimensional reality. I mean, he really brings soul. I mean, beyond all the physicality of the role, which is wonderful, he's very quirky, but at the same time, he has such heart, and in his eyes, there is so much there. He really does resonate, and he's a very complex character. And you really do get all those facets in this scene, so that I absolutely loved. And anyway, those are the three things that really worked for me. But then I get on to the things that I did not like so much, and there were quite a few, but I'm going to try to keep it to a minimum. First of all, the one thing that kept going through my mind, the one word I kept thinking about when I was watching this film was self-indulgent, or just indulgent. This film is very indulgent, I feel like, for Peter Jackson. It felt more like an homage or a love letter to the original trilogy rather than standing on its own as its own creative work. And I didn't really like that. I don't mind an homage in little areas here and there, but in this one I felt like it went overboard. First of all, I don't really understand why The Hobbit needed to be spread out over 3 films. It causes the plot to feel very thin, and in the words of Bilbo Baggins, it felt like butter being scraped over too much bread. See, I had to get a quote in there, at least one from the original trilogy. But that's really how it felt. A lot of this film just really meanders, and it really doesn't go anywhere. The plot is, well, there's not really that much plot. It just feels very clunky to me, and it was kind of boring. And I really didn't feel like there was any sort of core driving, brooding sense like I did with The Lord of the Rings. I mean, always you feel like there's something at stake and that everything means something in every scene. And even though The Lord of the Rings does have, you know, something more at stake than The Hobbit, The Hobbit is more of a slight story than that one, in my opinion. It just it just felt like a lot of the film was just very padded, and it didn't need to be. This film does not need to be spread out into 3 films. So that's one thing that really irritated me. Another thing was the look of this film. I know that this film is shot in a certain way because Peter Jackson really wants to be innovative, and he wants to kind of, you know, he wants cinema. He's pushing the boundaries of cinema, basically. But it does not work at all, or at least it didn't for me. A lot of people have been saying, you know, it really looks weird and very different at first, but once you get used to it, you know, it's fine. I never, ever got used to it. It really took me out of the film completely. It just has a very weird look. I mean, the characters look almost cartoonish, and yeah, everything looked very unnatural. It looked kind of artificial. And yes, on one hand, yes, this is a fantasy, so it's okay for things to look unrealistic, but this looked unrealistic in a way that wasn't at all aesthetically pleasing, in my opinion. The characters looked kind of as if they were sped up. Their movements looked sped up at times. Everything just did not kind of gel at all. And just the look of it, the cinematography, I did not like at all. The lighting was really harsh. I didn't like any of that. And it was very, very distracting. So I don't know what Peter Jackson was thinking when he did that. I mean, if they had just had maybe one person had kind of used their judgment and said, no, let's shoot this in a real, normal, cinematic way, I would have been so much happier. I would have liked this film so much more. It just lacked all that majestic quality that you get from the original trilogy, and I really missed that. And then finally, I guess if there's one more thing that I have to talk about, it would be, as I mentioned before, this film felt like a love letter to the original trilogy, and it really did. There are points in this film that it felt like there was nothing original at all, in my opinion. So, for instance, the score, which is done by Howard Shore. I love the original score to the original series. I have the extended edition 3-disc, 4-disc sets of all of the soundtracks. and they're wonderful. But in this one, all of it was basically recycled material, except for the dwarf theme, which I thought was really, really cool. But most of it is just recycled material, but done on such a bombastic level that it's trying to basically just suck the emotions out of you, saying, like, look, this is where you're supposed to feel happy, this is where you're supposed to feel sad, and all these different things. And I felt like Peter Jackson was doing that all the time in these movies. There is one scene at the very end, and again, this is a non spoiler review, so I'm not going to give away anything, but it's basically paying homage to uh, the end of Fellowship of the Ring during the death of Boromir. That is a very powerful scene when Boromir is getting stabbed by the arrows that Lurtz's arrows, and the music has this lovely chorus and these strings, and it's kind of in slow motion, but not to an overt extent. And the faces of the hobbits are extremely powerful. It's a good scene. But in this one, they kind of do something sort of similar, or at least it reminds you of the death of Boromir, but it's almost comedic in the way that it plays out when it's trying to be something really serious. It's got the slow motion in the choir, and the dwarves are yelling no, and it's so cliche. I almost started laughing. So I didn't feel any of the sentiment that I did in the originals. So while this film does have things about it that are admirable, it was not enough for me, and I'm really sad to say that, but it's just this film kind of is a letdown, nowhere near the original trilogies. So I can't quite recommend it. I'm sorry. I really can't. As much as I wanted to, I just didn't like it. But that's not going to stop any of you from seeing it. I really want to know what you guys think about it. Please be gentle in your comments to me. But anyway, that's pretty much what I have to say. So you can follow me on Twitter. The link is down there. Please comment, and thank you so much for listening.